Welcome to the Invincible Innovation Show, the podcast for changemakers. Each week, I talk to the most fascinating entrepreneurs and innovation leaders about innovation, strategy, and design. Hey everyone! Today we're going to talk about what and who could drive change. Welcome to Invincible Innovation Live. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm Mazor, Kario, Innovation and Value Creation Expert. I'll be your host. And today with me I have April K. Mills. Hey, April.
Good
Great to see you.
morning. Thanks. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever folks are. Yeah.
Yeah, April is the founder of Engine for Change, and I'm so happy that she's here with us. We're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, and you're much invited to join the discussion and ask questions. We'd love to hear what you think. Now we can start. Why do you think that driving change is so important these days? You know, we're in the middle of the COVID crisis, if somebody hears us afterwards, so it's like really important.
Yeah. Well, so first, I think I should define the term because sometimes there's confusion.
Right.
So, what I found in organizations is that we needed a better language around change because good or bad change wasn't really enough to describe it. And so I came up with a concept of driving change, which is choosing a change for yourself and clearing the obstacles for others to choose it too. That lives in stark contrast to what's typical in most organizations, which I call driving people, where we use coercion, threats, and authority to compel others to change. So we need that foundation to really understand that what we're facing in the pandemic is the loss of a lot of those typical methods that people used in organizations to compel others to change. The getting everybody in the room and staring them down, the social pressures and those structures which really reinforce this notion of authority-driven driving people. So driving change, where you're choosing a change for yourself, is so important because now that we're isolated at home, self-motivation and self-enrollment in a change is really what is enabling the things that are still progressing in our organizations to stay progressing, is that I care about it enough to put my time into it, to clear all the obstacles and make it happen. So it's so important, especially now for folks to drive change.
Yeah. You talk about what is the usual way of driving people. And we have this like hierarchy in a company. There is this manager. Everybody's like, they know when he comes, they know when he sits on the table. And now it's like everybody's is in cubes. It's like all the same. So it looks like it's flattening everything, because if we don't collaborate and we want to collaborate, it will probably work less, I would say.
Yep. Yeah, it's been, I think, a fantastic opportunity. And for folks who were remote from maybe a mostly co-located team, I've heard countless stories where they feel more included, that their voice is heard, that leveling, like you said, is really powerful. And yeah, bringing the boss or the manager into the team more as a member, less as an authority, is always beneficial. And bringing those folks that maybe were distance and a voice on the box on the table, now where we're all equal as our share on the screen, has been fantastic.
Yeah. And one more thing, which is really obvious, that there is no gap between the office and our house, our homes. And it's like we all see what's going on behind us, and sometimes someone comes into the discussion. So it's it happens a lot to me in any case.
Yep.
So how do you see this difference between driving people and driving change? What would leaders need to do in order to drive change?
So the biggest difference is that the first step in driving people is often giving an order, right? So this would be the email or the meeting where you pull everybody together and you say, all of us, usually they say us, but what they really mean is all of you are going to go do this thing or else. How the big contrast with driving change is instead either just starting to do the thing that you want everybody else to do, like running better meetings is a very simple example, or focusing on quality or focusing on safety. You just start doing it as a leader, and then later on, and this could be even the next day, you could say, you know, yesterday when I started our meeting with safety, here's why I did that. I believe in safety. Here's what I'm doing to make us safer. And I'd like to seek all of your help in helping our organization to be safer. That's so much more powerful than a leader showing up and saying, I'm announcing a safety initiative. I've assigned Joe over there to be in charge of it. You all go figure it out. And then leaning back and crossing arms. So it's subtle. It's not much different, but it's so significant.
Yeah. And what you're saying is even more important right now. And I think that all organizations and leaders in general, everyone has this chaotic situation. Everything is unfamiliar and unknown. So we need to feel the togetherness in this loneliness, and each one in his home and his context. And I think that understanding that people drive things from within and not because they are told, especially right now, is so important for us as human beings to feel that we have this internal compass that tells us where to go, right?
Yeah.
And not like, you do that.
Yeah,
And
that agency, that's what I focus on with change agency, is to feel that agency of I can be an agent for the change I want.
yeah. And what do innovation leaders should know in order to drive change in their organization?
So I think one of the big things for innovation leaders to pay attention to is how they can role model breaking free from old assumptions. Most innovation lies on the other side of a paradigm shift. And a paradigm shift is a lot like a fog that hangs between where you're at and where you want to be. And most folks don't go through that fog. They assume I'm unsure on what's on the other side, so I'll stay with what I know. So innovation leaders who are driving change need to actually explicitly bring up the assumptions they used to have and which ones they've given up and why that's made all the difference. If you think about the great examples throughout history of innovation leaders, there's usually those big assumptions they shifted that allowed them to get that breakthrough result. What if we merge these two technologies together versus keeping them apart, right? The old assumption is they're different disciplines. I merge them, I get something fantastic and new. What if we push recalls to cars instead of bringing the cars to us, right? Those big Tesla changes that are happening. I think that's a great example today of how many assumptions can you just ignore that other people think they can't give up, and how much of a difference does that make? So that's what I'd encourage them.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but usually when people are thinking differently or questioning the status quo, it's first it's hard, and they see resistance in other people because it's hard to change. And how could you help people believe that they can pass this fog and go through it, right?
Yeah, so that's where driving change comes in. Because if you're driving people, the assumption is if I just order you to give up your assumption, you'll give it up. That's not how it works. Just like you can't order someone to learn. You can order them to go to a class, but you can't order them to learn. So this is very similar. So the way a leader can role model it is to say, here's what I did to get across this. And I'm here to help you through any obstacles if you want to be over there with me too. You can't pull people through this looking glass. I used to joke, don't take people on a forced mission, abduct them like aliens abducting someone. That's what driving people a lot of times is it feels like an alien abduction to people. I didn't want to go. I didn't know where I was going. I think it was all maybe a myth. And then they just returned to where they were with this weird story. You'd much rather have people boarding that rocket ship willingly to that new place. And that's what I think you see in the really successful innovators, not the ones ordering people to innovate, but the truly innovative companies, is they constantly return to where people are and say, here's how I got over there. And if you want to go, I'm here for you.
Yeah. It's like being more vulnerable in a sense for a leader, right?
Yep.
Because he's not like, I know all, you need to go where I think you should go. It's like really questioning what could be done, or what can we do, or what's the right way. Because when you're more vulnerable, I think that you get more cooperation, and people really want to relate, and they feel that, yeah, we are in this together. It's not like you're the smart guy and I need to be with you on it. And what you said about the abduction is something that I really understand. Sometimes I come from Israel, and Israel is very like, practical. Let's do things. And because Israelis in general are very proactive, I would say, sometimes not everyone are in the same pace. And
Yeah.
so you need to really take people and just do it. And sometimes it is a bit aggressive in a sense, like because we need to do it, and we need to do it fast and now. And therefore sometimes it's like a power dynamics within the companies when it happens this way. And it's a really way of like a very manly way to handle it. Like, this is what should be done. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Do you agree with like what, does it make sense?
Yeah, well, and that's why I find that driving change is so refreshing, especially as we're trying to drive for more inclusive organizations, is that I've met countless program managers, project managers, leaders that are women who don't feel authentic in demanding and declaring and forcing and compelling. They'd rather partner and go together with people. And they find it's more effective, more authentic for them, but they've lacked a terminology and a validation of this notion of, look, I'm committed to this project. I want you to be committed to, how can we work together? And now with driving change, they have a way of describing their leadership style that contrasts it with a different leadership style and says, mine actually gets better results. And so that, I think, is a powerful alternative. And what's funny is if you look at those strong, manly, maybe official or military-like role models, what you actually see is no matter how brusque or prickly maybe the managers were, the leaders were, the most successful ones are the ones that were so committed to where they were going to. If we think about American generals, right? Patton, MacArthur, the one who wanted to be the first down the gangplank, the first into battle, that's driving change. They could be harsh and gruff and have high standards, but they were driving change. They weren't saying, you know what you men should do? You should go and fight the battle this way. I'll sit back here. So I think we can actually differentiate between those who are just bluster and declaration for others, and those that might be bluster but are out in front with people.
And is it research? There are studies showing that this drives better results, like the more female style of management. I know that I heard it is, but was it studied like officially?
I don't know the latest research on it, but I think you can see through the examples, if you go back and look at different examples in history, armed with these pictures of the difference, right? Of driving people, the coercion, the threats, the compulsion, and the driving change, the choosing it for yourselves. If you use those terms and you go back and look at case studies, what you'll see is that stark difference between short-term results, which were usually around driving people. I got them up the hill once, versus the long-term and sustainable and repeated successes of driving change, where the person is more committed than all the people they're asking to commit with them to the initiative. And that's, I think, what the difference usually ends up being with founders versus second or third CEOs. Because the founder, obviously, if they've founded something, is more committed to this mission than all of the employees that they hire on after them. But then you get to the second and third, maybe CEO, and it's their job. And so they think their job is to tell the people in the organization what to do and you see this degradation of that capability in what used to be a very innovative company. And I'd argue it's because there's less driving change and more driving people.
Yeah, makes sense. So, what is the best way to handle a crisis, and how can we grow in these challenging times?
So the best way I think to handle the crisis is to gather up the learning you're getting and declare it and share it for how it's changing you and how you show up. Because that gives permission for others to notice the change too and craft their own path through it. So oftentimes if folks try to pretend, oh, I knew all this was coming all along, the veneer on that is thin and reality breaks through. But if you declare, I didn't know how this pandemic was going to go for us, but I knew I was committed to figuring out, say, how to get all my folks remote access to systems and how to support a true work-life integration and a balance, not just a work expanding to fit your entire day because now your workplace is your home. So work grows instead of home growing. And the more folks do that, I think the more they'll draw their employees and the others in their org to them. And as we go through crises, it's important to feel those bonds and connections. And I know that driving change creates those much stronger than driving people.
Yeah. But you mentioned lots of things that are related to emotional connections and talking to people, understanding how to move people. And it seems to me that many leaders are really good in numbers and in business and how to network well and maybe do business with other like leaders. But this is a capability that I feel like is not really focused on, maybe not in the MBA studies. I never had an MBA study. So does it make sense that this is something that maybe is like a bonus, but it's not a must-have for a leader?
I think it's becoming a must-have. I don't think it's been taught consistently because a lot of folks have managed to get to positions without this capability. But what you're seeing, I think, as crises like this pandemic hits and as things change, is there's going to be a clear differentiation between those who have these skills and those who don't in this next generation of opportunities. Because forming a connection is so vital in a connected world. It can't just be an authority chain that flows between us. It must be a connection. And so I'm confident that this next generation is really going to see that power in that of making the connection through driving, things like driving change. And you're seeing trends in this. If you look at Seth Godin's Alt MBA, his focus there in that program, and I was lucky to go through it last year, is on what he calls real skills. And I love that because I've always opposed this concept of soft skills versus hard skills. It dismisses so many things that are vital through a negative connotation of soft instead of hard, especially in technology companies. Right. And so this shift from soft skills to real skills, these are going to be the differentiators because these are the things you can't outsource to a computer, to an AI, to connect, to comfort, to understand, to work together in that symbiotic way of connection emotionally, where folks can understand how I'm invested myself in something and how they're invested, not financially, but personally, with something I won't get back. That time that I invest, you never get it back. So it's a very important and precious commodity. So I'm confident that's where it's going to go because the results just won't be there if you just stick to the mechanical side of life.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's connected to two things. One is like I read, I think 10, 15 years ago, a book about left side and right side brain. And I think it's Daniel Pink's book. And it said that these capabilities of being a more emotional, connected, intuitiveness, creativity, and so forth is going to be more important. And I think we feel it right now. And another thing that comes to my mind is the fact that, the commitment between an employee and his the way in where he works is not as strong in the past. Like my father, he worked like 20 years in the same company, and today the companies are failing much before than a very like it was 50 years, now it's like 70 years old to be done with the company. But more than that, employees are moving really, really fast. I think that in tech in Israel, 1.5 year is like, yeah, that's the average. It's like if I don't feel connected, and when I work at home, I don't go together to eat lunch, I don't come to the offices, I don't see everyone each day, just, like talking next to the coffee machine. So it's even less connected. So
Yep.
if we don't see that, at least that there are people there, like I will go with a place that maybe gives me more benefits, and that's it. I don't need to stay here.
Yep. It becomes transactional, right?
Yeah.
Versus that connection. And what's fascinating is most of driving people, this coercion, this threat, this compulsion is based on the notion that I can ostracize you if you don't cooperate. I can hold it against you long term if you don't get on board. So you used to hear people say, oh, you don't want to make that person mad, because they're going to be around for a while. Well, you're seeing what I call these half-lives of positions that are shrinking. So where it used to be, I might want to make sure I make you happy because we might work together for the next 20 years. So I'm not going to burn a bridge here, not complying with that as my long-term goal. But if I'm only going to work with you for 1.5 years, what does it bother me to tell you no? And if the job market's strong and I know I can get a job anyplace else and I don't understand the change you're making, I'm not going to put my precious time into it. And so that's where I think in a lot of cases, driving people is breaking. But
Yeah.
folks don't know what to replace it with. And that's why I'm really passionate about getting the message out there about driving change is most folks drive people because that's what they've seen modeled to them. And that's all they've ever done. And they don't have a name for it. And they don't have a name for something else. So if I can give them something else, they can make a more powerful difference, even in a transactional world, because I can say, look, if you're only here for 1.5 years or you're here for 20, I'm passionate and I'd love for you to go with me on this journey for as long as you're here. You're going to get a lot more out of a transactional employee that way than you are by saying, well, I only have 18 months of orders to give you, so here's a stack of things to do. Proceed. Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah. And it goes even further when we know that people are going to be more like self-employed and freelancing and maybe partial work and not like working 20 years full-time job in the same company. So
Yep.
it's much more flexible, and therefore you need to really attract these people and go deep to their hearts in order to do this like connection. I know that you wrote one book, which sounds like really, really cool. And you're working on 1 or 2 new books. So could you tell us about that a bit?
Yeah. So my first book was Everyone is a Change Agent, and that came out in 2016. And now I'm writing a book called Change Tactics. And what it includes is 50 simple tactics that people can use to implement driving change in their life, in the way they're working, in their organizations. Trying to really help people have a new tool set, because so many of the things we do in organizations are built on a foundation of driving people. This is how I give the order. This is how I sustain the order. This is how I check on the order I've given. And as that collapses, I want to fill that void with a whole range of opportunities that folks can have to make a bigger difference in their organizations.
Yeah. And I think that the gap between what is the personal life and the business life is a bit more flurry in a sense. And it's fuzzy. You don't see it as much. And if I could understand how to drive change within my personal life, and it doesn't matter what are my goals, I can do the same tactics for what I do in my work life as a leader, as a manager, so forth.
Yep. Yep. And that's when I wrote Everyone is a Change Agent, the focus was really threefold. There was one on organizations, but there was also on personal and making changes you wanted for yourself. And then there was also a community piece as well, which is becoming more and more vital as we deal with pandemics, which are really community events. And so all driving change also works in community settings where the
Could
notion
you
of
give an
culture.
example? Could you give an
Yes,
example?
yeah. So the big story in Everyone's a Change Agent that I tell and carry throughout the book is of building a beyond accessible playground in Bremerton, Washington. And we used all of the tactics of driving change and what I call the 7 change agent essentials to go from the thought that we should have an accessible playground, because my 13-year-old son has spina bifida, so he uses a wheelchair and forearm crutches to get around. And when he was little, there wasn't a playground he could play on successfully with his siblings, with his friends, with other children with his condition. And so a few of us mothers got together with a few community members, and we approached the city and said, we'd like to partner with you to bring a playground like this into our community. And over the course of 3.5 years, we raised $550,000, and we installed a 9,000 square foot accessible playground, the first in that region for children with special needs.
Wow.
And it's a phenomenal example of how, with an intention and a willingness to overcome the next obstacle and then the next obstacle and then the next obstacle, we made it so there weren't any obstacles for those children between their want to play and their ability to do it.
Yeah.
And the tactics in that book are available to everyone. They're not country specific, region specific. They're human to human. And so we all have an opportunity to be change agents.
Yeah, it's a wonderful story. When I think about all the talents as a person that you have, like you have talents, and if you're passionate, you can express and utilize these skills and talents. But when you are like, this is what you need to do, and sometimes in the beginning it was very interesting for you, but after a few years, maybe it's not challenging anymore to do the same position or the same role. And these talents are not expressed. But when you're understanding that you're dealing with people, you see them more than a role, more than a box, and you can get much more than that. Like to really understand what you could get when you are connecting this way.
Yep. Yeah, that's why I talk about the unleashing the power that's hidden in organizations. So much of the power in organizations is a lot like a strong river, right? Flowing fast to the sea. And what we've learned over the course of the past 2 centuries is we can actually harness that power and turn it into hydroelectric power, right? We harness the energy in the falling water and the flowing water to achieve amazing results. And it's the same thing in organizations. Everybody shows up, whether it's online or in an office, with an amount of potential energy every day. And I find most times that energy is wasted and dissipated in friction and frustration and compulsion and conformance. This is why we talk about covering. We talk about people not showing up at 100% in their authentic self. All of those are deficits on that energy. What driving change does is unleash that by partnering it up with someone who's already passionate and saying, if you're passionate about this too, come join me. And you see a wave of energy sweep across organizations as they adopt this concept.
Yeah, it really makes sense that once you feel empowered, you can really express your powers, right? And once you feel that you're like a victim, like you say, oh, okay, I cannot do nothing. I'll just, pass my days, pass my hours till, 5 o'clock, I can go. And, it's like, when you think about it, it's like everybody would like to express his capabilities. Like we aspire to have the option to take all our talents and just to express them. And it's like when you pass on and distribute the power, like it's not me going down, it's like a net.
Yeah.
And that way we can achieve much more from each other, I guess.
Yep. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Yeah. How could companies update their cultures toward innovation and these changes?
I think one of the big keys is to look more for opportunities to actually help folks learn about driving change so that they can get engaged and involved. The problem with most innovation programs in companies is that they're based on driving people. So though they'll ask maybe the employees for ideas, the employee then shows up with an idea and in effect tries to almost play act at being a senior leader. They'll go, here's my idea, so you have to do this on this agenda, otherwise you don't really care about this. And they cross their arms and they get frustrated and grumpy. And then the leaders don't like that because they don't want to be treated that way. That's why they aspired to be managers, so they could stop having to take orders and they could start giving them. And so we ask for innovative ideas. The people show up to drive the innovation program through finger waving. The innovation program doesn't like it, so then they diminish it and the whole program collapses. But if you center your innovation program around driving change, you say, if you're passionate about something, I want you to show up with that idea, and then I want to partner my capital or my allowance of time or something else with your idea, and then you drive it. But here's the deal. You have to get people to join you. You can't order anybody to do anything for you. And that subtle shift is so amazing for folks because it breaks them out of this notion of, if only everyone would obey me, I could get my outcome. And it helps them realize that that's not how it works in the market. That's not how it works in growing a business. And that's not how it works in generating and sustaining an innovation. You really need someone who's passionate, who can get others passionate about it, to buy it, to use it, to help you improve it. And so setting a groundwork of an innovation program on driving change will produce an amazing difference in your organization.
I think that what we're talking more or less about is about the power dynamics within a company, and maybe make it less harsh and more flexible and more distributed than really focused on these leaders or managers doing the work.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really great way just to see even the world, that it's not like this person, he has the power, he calls the shots, and I need to, go and do what he says, or I'm influenced by someone and I need to do what they believe. It's like I'm a power station myself.
Yep.
I can create what I want.
Yep.
So what is your number one tip for innovation leaders?
I think my number one tip is for them to talk about how they generate energy in themselves towards their innovation. Because what that'll show folks is that great innovation leaders didn't start as the heads of companies. You don't not be an innovation leader and then you're CEO and then you start innovating. You have to build the capability to do that all along. When I worked for the Navy, they'd talk about you need to lead like an admiral when you're a lieutenant, not in terms of the authority to compel, but the responsibility and the ability to demonstrate your willingness to make bold decisions, to take action, to lead from the front. And that, I think, is the big opportunity for so many innovation leaders, is don't let people look up to you at the end of your career. Show them the stories of your first tries and your second and your third try, because they're comparing themselves against your end, not your beginning. And they're thinking, I can never compete with their end, so why even start? And there's so many more innovation leaders out there. If we just remember that all of them once were not a founder of a company, or not a senior executive, or not an admiral. They all started someplace else, and I can aspire to be that person first and then work my way up from there.
Yeah, especially when you think about entrepreneurship, which is like, I think it's a wave of failures, one after the other. I think that Churchill said that not success is staying energetic between failures, or something like that. I don't, right? And I think that this is connected.
Yep.
So it's been such a pleasure talking to you, and I think we could continue, furthermore. And where could people hear more and buy the book and contact you?
So the book is available at most online sellers. So Everyone is a Change Agent is the title. And then I've also got a blog and website Engine for Change with hyphens. So it's engine and then a hyphen, FOR-change.com. And then I'm also Engine for Change on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. Include that K, the April K Mills, then you'll find me. You Google April Mills, lots of people come up. You Google April K Mills, you'll find me. And I've also got a YouTube channel, youtube.com/April K Mills, where I've got a wealth of keynotes I've given over the years and lots of content. So really look forward to connecting with so many folks.
Sure. We have like a small comment before we go. Well said. Personal innovation engagement is a small plant growing. I really
love it.
Yeah. So I don't know who said it, but thank you for your thinking with us. And to all of you change makers out there, thank you for joining us. I would love to see you next time. You're much invited to go to invincibleinnovation.com and hear more. I want to thank you again, April. It was lots of fun and a pleasure for me. And
thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Sure. And thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. I'm Mazor Kario, and you've been listening to the Invincible Innovation Podcast. Make sure to visit our website, invincibleinnovation.com, where you can learn more about our programs and my book, Innovating Through Chaos. I'll be waiting for you next week in our next episode. Thank you for listening.